You can't tell how someone feels just by looking at them or what they share online. To the outside world, our lives may look perfect, even if in reality they aren't. I'm always worrying about doing well at school, and with the end of year test coming up, I'm not sure how much longer I can cope. My thoughts swarm around my head, sometimes keeping me up all night. Some days it's just all too much, and I feel like I'm lost in space. When I did badly on one of my tests, I just about kept it together until I got home. Then I broke down crying in front of my mum. She listened for a bit, and then she told me that, just like physical health, we all have mental health. It's our feelings, our thinking, our emotions, and our moods. She then said that feeling down, angry, and stressed is a normal part of life, just like it's normal to feel happy, confident, and carefree sometimes. We all have positive and negative emotions that come and go based on what's happening around us. These are everyday feelings. Good mental health means experiencing negative emotions. It's not always about being happy. Mum can relate to the feelings of stress. So when Mum suggested I take a break from everything and do something I enjoy, I actually took her advice. So I made myself a hot chocolate, snuggled up in a duvet and watched a film. And you know what? Afterwards I felt so much better. Mum should take her own advice.
Most of us only ever share the good things. We don't like to share how we really feel. Every morning when I wake up, negative thoughts stream through my head. Getting out of bed and pretending I'm okay takes all the energy I have. As the day goes on, the negative thoughts turn from a stream into a river. The water rushes through my head so loudly it's hard to concentrate in lessons. And some days it's so bad it feels like a waterfall that's trying to pull me over the edge. Everything is so overwhelming. I didn't think my friends would understand if I told them how down I was feeling. But when Sasha opened up to me about how stressed she was feeling, I told her. I wasn't sure how to bring up how I'd been feeling, so I started by saying that I didn't feel like myself. Just her listening made me feel like she understood. She told me some things that had helped her, so I tried them too, but it didn't make much of a difference. Even when I tried to be around my friends, I felt alone. The things I used to enjoy weren't fun anymore.
I was really worried about Andre and not sure what to do. He was quiet and wasn't hanging out with us like he used to. So I asked our head of year for some advice. He suggested I get Andre to speak to him since his negative feelings weren't going away.
I didn't want to speak to our head of year, but I also didn't want to keep feeling so down, so I went. He said that sometimes we have overwhelming feelings that can be more intense than our everyday feelings. These feelings hang around for a long time and change the way we feel, think, and behave. They can stop us doing what we want to in life. That's what I was going through. He also said that if we're physically unwell, we let people know, we ask for help. It should be no different with mental health. Sometimes our overwhelming feelings are brought on because of things in our life. Sometimes they happen for no reason at all. After hearing this, I felt much less alone and it felt good to talk. Scientists have found exercise can help when you're feeling low, so our head of year encouraged me to sign up to the school football club, which Sasha was already in. I still have days when the river is there, but now I'm beginning to understand my mental health. I'm learning how to cope. Our head of year reminded me that my friends, family, teachers, and lots of others at school are there to help just as much as he is. I had no idea the people around me could be so understanding. And while it's not always easy to talk about my mental health, the person I'm talking to might be able to help. If you don't feel like talking, that's fine. You could try writing, sports, reading, art, music, playing with your pet, whatever makes you feel better.
If you're the person someone talks to when they're struggling, just listen with no pressure or judgments. You don't have to have the answer. If you feel unsure about anything, you can speak to a trusted adult. Talking about mental health doesn't have to be difficult. After all, it's something we all have.
Pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Great. Welcome again to our third week of Mental Health Week. So I shall pass you over to Mr. Khan, Hafiz Khan, to open us up. Hafiz. Yeah, his mic. Unmute your mic, Hafiz.
All right, so we
Good.
go. Welcome to Family TV. My name is Hafiz Khan, and I will be your main host this evening. May the peace and blessings of God be with all who is joining us this evening. Family TV is a subsidiary of FISCAL, a non-governmental organization and sister organization to the National Islamic Counseling Services. Family TV's main programming objective is to propagate and rejuvenate good family life. We focus on parenting, marriage, and all other aspects of propagating good, improving family relationships. FISCAL has partnered with the U.S. Embassy of Trinidad and Tobago Public Affairs Unit to conduct a 4-part series of mental health. The Chief Education Officer has reviewed this program that we are doing, and that is Ms. Lisa Henry David, and has in fact recommended that all teachers participate with this program. And she has communicated that to all the school supervisors, principals, vice principals, for they to forward on to their teachers and also the parents. And our feedback is that a lot of teachers have actually started looking from the last program, and we have been getting pretty good feedback from them. We would like to officially say thank you to Ms. Henry David and also to Mrs. Michelle Carter, who was instrumental in having this done. The first part of the program, mental health, was done on the 11th of April. And at that program, we defined general mental health, physical health, spiritual health, and also we debunked a lot of myths that we all know are prevalent within our society about mental health. We also examined the stigmas that scare people away from seeking help. You know, a lot of people think that once you're going for help with mental health, you're probably mad. And that's the biggest issue that we have. So we dealt with that particular situation. The second program, entitled Building the Foundation for a Great Family, we did last week. And that focused on the common health issues that affect children between 1 and 11. That was an exceedingly interesting and informative discussion on all issues pertaining to mental health in children. I would encourage those who did not have the opportunity to see that program to do so. It is available on Family TV Facebook page and also on YouTube. If you're having any problems to access, please call FISCAL at 763-2960 and talk to Wahida, and she will guide you accordingly to how to access those programs. The third episode, which we are having today, Preparing Our Youth for the Real World, would cover common mental health issues that affect teenagers from 12 to 18. And our fourth program, which would be entitled Mental Health for All, would be held next week, which would be May 2nd. And that would deal with adults and elderly. We look at preventive factors generally and other general information pertaining to mental health. We have had some different panels at every different program, every program that we have had so far. Some of the members of the panel have returned with other programs. And this is to ensure that we have the professionals that are relevant to what we are dealing with, so that we can have the ultimate in discussion and advice for the viewers. Today we have another great panel, and I would first like to introduce my co-host, who would introduce the panel. She is a counselor and a trauma therapist, and has been with NICS from its inception. She is Michael Byam. Hi, Michelle. You can introduce the panelists, please.
Hi, good afternoon again. It's always a pleasure to be here. So we want to welcome you, the viewer, and our panelists to our third Mental Health Awareness Week. Welcome to the session, panelists. and I will introduce you, and then you will share just a little couple words on your own behalf, right? So first of all, we have Mrs. Vandana Susanka Ali, a clinical psychologist. She holds a Master's of Science Honors degree from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. She works in the field of child protection and has played an instrumental role in re-engineering the current child protection system into a new and progressive one. She has operationalized and manages assessment centers in Trinidad and Tobago. Mrs. Susanka Ali has worked with very young children with basic adjustment issues all the way to late adolescent juvenile offenders with severe clinical problems. She has also done numerous presentations on child protection, child development, children's rights, parenting, self-psychology, marriage, and relationships. She is no stranger to FISCAL either, providing her presentation skills and offering her counseling services when necessary. Welcome, Ms. Susanka Ali.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here once again. And like I said last week, there's no health without mental health, so I'm really looking forward to being able to share with my fellow panelists some insights so that we can build the skill set of the population observing today's program.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. And we look forward to having that information. Next, we have Ms. Crystal Johnson, mental health clinician. Crystal has been in practice for 11 years, employed by the Archdiocesan Family Life Commission as family therapist, special projects coordinator, and serves as a school therapist for a private secondary school. She graduated from Nova Southeastern University in Miami, Florida, both with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology with a minor in Sociology and Counseling in 2007, and a Master of Science in Mental Health Counseling in 2010. She is a school counselor and provides counseling services and psychoeducational sessions for the students and teachers for both their personal and professional development. Her training includes psychological testing in Pearson's Behavior Symptom Checklist and brief psychometrics, biopsychosocial assessments, psychoeducational groups, individual therapy, group therapy, family therapy, and art therapy sessions, very broadly trained. So welcome, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be part of this program today that is educating and bringing awareness on the topic of mental health in Trinidad and Tobago. I believe as professionals, any opportunity to shed light and strength on mental health is one we could really truly appreciate. So I hope after this, our viewers, our families, our parents feel a bit more empowered about mental health and mental health problems, also knowing what resources are available if they should need or if they know someone who may need psychological help. So thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, we look forward to hearing about the resources available because the approach we have is about family and helping families to deal with mental health issues. Excellent. Thank you. So our gentleman on the panel today, Mr. Kirk Peer, counseling psychologist and a doctoral candidate. Mr. Peer, bachelor's in science honors and master's honors as well, a certified traumatologist as well. Certified human trafficking consultant. As a mental health professional, Kirk has been working with persons both locally and regionally. Deputy Manager of Victim and Witness Support Unit. Kirk Peer of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, where his dynamic skill set has led to institutional strengthening, which is important, and evidence-based service delivery. Welcome, Mr. Peer.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to the panel as well. And again, any discussion on mental health is an improvement over the last 20 years. So
Yes.
this is Sunday afternoon, Pacific time, but every time is a good time to have the discussion. And once
Correct.
we encourage people to get involved in treatment and therapy, we will see behavioral changes coming through the country.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, and we really look forward. For those joining us today, we always have an interesting panel, and we have a broad, ranged discussion, in store for you. So please keep viewing, and also next week, tie into our fourth and final mental health awareness session next week as well. So I will hand over to Mr. Khan, Hafiz, to start us off, and we'll take it from there.
All right. So, so, so I would just want to do the first question, and then I will pass back to Michelle to do most of the other questions. So I just want to start off. We covered the issue of common problems on 1 to 11. And a lot of those things that we covered last week would in fact have been, some of them would apply to the age group 12 to 18. What we would want to know is what are those other issues that are specific to the 12 to 18, and we could probably go through those, and then we could start to go back to see if we need to relate to what we discussed last week. So for last week's program, as I indicated earlier, all those programs are on Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to know what was discussed last week and what are the issues that were discussed, you could probably go and look at that program again. So rather than repeating that whole thing, we want to focus clearly on what are the issues, the main issues that affect adolescents from 12 to 18. So Michelle, you could go ahead and take it from there and do the questions.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, wonderful. So, all right. So we last week, as Hafiz had mentioned, we did 1 to 18. Can we start off sort of making a bridge between some of the disorders that we dealt with last week that may be common also to this age group, and then we will build it from there, right? So last week we would have dealt with some depressive disorders, anxiety disorders. We touched on trauma as well, and we want to sort of spill that over as our bridge into today's session, which is the 12 to 18. So any comments in terms of maybe the incidence of it in this adolescent age group as different from the incidence in the 1 to 11 age group? And who would like to take that one? Shall we start with Vandana, maybe, having been here last week, so we can bridge us, and then we'll pass on to the others.
Okay, sure, thanks. In my experience, I can't say that it's easily distinguished like that by age group.
Yes.
You know, depression and anxiety is and trauma very, very much present in both young children as well as in adolescents. How it manifests is different, but we definitely see a high incidence in both sets of populations. I can say certainly with depression, in my experience, we would see a lot more self-harm and suicidality in the teenage population. We do see it in the younger age groups as well, but it's definitely more prevalent, more prominent, more serious, more severe in the older population. Anxiety manifests quite differently in both populations. I would say for young children, I have seen, it tends to manifest very physiologically, the tummy aches, the headaches, the reluctance to attend school, whereas it tends to graduate a little more into panic attacks and sometimes what we call internalizing and externalizing symptoms for the teenagers, so anxiety sometimes may be at the core of why a teenager may be aggressive.
Right.
So in my experience, I would say I would not distinguish between age groups, but definitely in terms of how they manifest, it's different.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, and really is to bring it out for the viewer to understand. Also, what I have found too is that because they're older, the adolescents are older, they're more in tune with therapy, needing therapy, and some even come out and ask for therapy in cases where in a family circle nobody else is able to identify that there's a problem, but they of themselves, would come out and ask for therapy. So before we go into the disorders again, can we ask what is therapy, and should they decide to go ask their parents to have therapy, will they have to be on it for their whole lives? Is it like a long-term thing, or what can it do for them? And is it going to be a lifetime thing? Because I know that's the concern of even the parents and the young people who come forward. Anybody who wants to handle that? Crystal, would you like
Yeah.
to? Yes.
So what is therapy? Just a general definition, I suppose, that will help. Is just a form of treatment for psychological problems between therapists and clients. In this case, we're talking about adolescents. So we're looking at working together to understand the problems and come up with a plan together for fixing them. So we apply our research-based techniques to help people develop effective habits, and we provide definitely a supportive environment. So it allows, especially for teens, especially in this stage of adolescence, to talk openly, as you rightly said. I'm also getting so much more experience with adolescents coming open-heartedly to therapy now. So I think once we set the grounds in therapy and develop that rapport in the first session, they feel very open because we are giving them that supportive environment that is objective and it's neutral and non-judgmental. That's a part of therapy for you. So definitely encourages that open and honest dialogue. In regards to therapy being for their whole life, I think it is really dependent, because therapy could last anywhere from one session to several months or even years. It just depends on the mental health problem or the disorder, the nature of the problem, the impact, the impairment, the agreed goals, and even the marked progress and improvement. So everything is a bit dependent. So, it depends also on the type of therapy we might use. So like just for example, with CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, we may have 10 to 20 sessions on a specific goal for someone who is like afraid to drive, like a teen who's afraid to drive for the first time, let's just see, just for example. And then, a lot of things is addressed throughout, talk therapy, relax. So it's really, to me, dependent on the nature of the problem. It also depends on the individual themselves. Resilience is a factor. Coping mechanisms is a factor. Their home environment is a factor in their support in their familiar relationships that could help them progress faster or even just move even not as fast as they should.
Yes, correct. And the
Crystal, if I may add, Michelle.
Yes.
Sure.
Based on the definition that Crystal would have given there, we can also add that it helps them learn more about themselves. So it's not really it takes away the myth of I'm not well, right? And it also helps persons as well in terms of structuring from dreams to goals. So the process of how do I take all these thoughts that I have that may be useful, that are useful, but are just thoughts right now, and transform it into something like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound that I could actually use throughout my lifespan. So therapy could be lifelong once it is seen as goal-oriented, process-oriented, and also helps person move from one stage of a life to the next stage while working through particular issues that may come up along the developmental curve or the trauma-based curve.
Yes, that's excellent. Thanks for sharing that, because I personally have experienced that where you resolve and they grow, but then it changes, their needs change, and you just keep going on helping them to plan. So the theme for today is preparing youth for the real world. And one of the things that we realize is that the ducks don't always line up, in the real world. Everything isn't always in line and ready to jump from one thing to the next. And it's important that families understand that. Because one of the things we find is that, the family may think, wow, they have so much potential. Why they're not moving forward? Why this? Why that? Why not the other, right? So it's excellent. So a big part of preparing for the real world is to accept also that there may be mental health challenges on your journey that you need to, group as a family encourage progression, be positive about therapy, and also be willing to extend it into the goal-oriented support that the persons may need. So thanks a lot for that, Kirk. Excellent, very good. So as we go into, all of this is to clarify for the viewer so that you can clarify your journey, right? Be open to therapy. So now we're going to get into some of the disorders so you can understand what you're seeing. And again, the caution that was given in last session is that don't be hasty to diagnose or self-diagnose. These are just guidelines to make you more aware, just as the program says, to build the awareness so that you have an idea of what you're seeing. And then we want to clear up a lot of the misunderstandings that will then block you from reaching for help. So that's really our goal in the program. Okay. So let's get into the disorders. What are we going to cover this week, guys? And who's going to start? Who is willing? Crystal, that smile looks like you are ready for us, right? So we'll start with you. Please share.
So I think over the last few years and even now in the midst of COVID, definitely the most common mental illness I think as of this time is anxiety, mood in regards to depression, behavior disorders as well. PTSD I think is very big right now. So I guess for time and to just make it really simple, I guess we just start with the disorders that yeah, so I'll just go over with just general anxiety disorder with teens. So just for the viewers to know, general anxiety disorder is just that excessive anxiety and worry about events and activities, and the duration and the frequency of the anxiety and the worry is way out of proportion that it actually is, right? For children, as Vandana said, you see a lot of physiological problems as well, you know, the tummy aches and stuff like that with the younger ones. With teens though, I really see the fidgety type of behavior, irritability, very much irritable, difficulty concentrating in class. Sometimes they even zone out in front of me in therapy sessions as well. But according to the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual that we follow, for children and teens, it's only one item is required. So there's a lot of criteria that is being met, but that's just a general ish with, I guess, anxiety disorders. I don't think I should go into the specifics. It's a lot. So there's a lot of requirements and criteria to meet to be diagnosed as having anxiety, but definitely to look out for restlessness and the fatigue and the difficulty concentrating and stuff like that. I think it's important to also note that the difference between an anxiety disorder and then what might just be some anxious feelings as well, because I think you rightly said we don't want to go hasty into it. And if I give you the definition, you're like, oh my gosh, I wonder if my child is this and is that. Maybe I should get a psychologist soon. I think it's a bit about observing, understanding your child's norm, you know, how they function, what's their behavior, how they normally move and stuff like that to really mark a difference. So I think in regards to distinguishing, let's just say with the anxiety, you know, you're looking at things like the duration of how long do you see it happening for, the persistence of it, and the impairment, like if it's affecting schoolwork and stuff like that, relationships, if they're behaving out of character. So that's what I'll have to say about anxiety. I don't know if my colleagues will have anything else to add as well.
All right. Before they add, one of the, you know, the signs and symptoms, that exhaustion, it's sort of dragging, right? So to a typical family, they're like, okay, all right, you're giving big words to laziness. They're lazy, right? And they want to come for a big name to be excused for laziness. Tell me about that. So how can they know the difference between the dragging of laziness and the exhaustion as a sign and symptom?
Definitely, the exhaustion is definitely a different mood. Laziness, you know, if you ask them to do stuff and it's normal, like the normal things that they will normally do, that's in character. I think that's fine. But when it's out of character, then it's something to kind of, maybe I should not deem it as lazy. Maybe I need to ask the right questions as well. So the difference is, I think, what's normal and what's not normal for me, and ask the questions of what's happening as a parent. I see you're not doing this so much anymore. Is it that you're tired or you just don't feel like doing it? So you have a better understanding. So if you don't feel like doing it, okay, well, just let me know that. And then I will kind of tell you the difference, if it's just, I don't want to do it because I'm a teen and I have better things to do.
That's right.
Right? Or is
Yeah.
it because of something else that's brewing inside that is making them withdraw?
Yeah.
So again, definitely knowing the norm, the baseline, I suppose,
Yeah.
I think is really important, because at the end of the day, these are our children. We know every wound, every battle scar, everything. So even more now as they journey into adolescence, we have to pay so much more attention to what's happening in this transition and this stage.
Yes, thank you. Yes, anybody else wanted to
Yeah,
add
and
to that?
excellent, Crystal. Let's add as well, I'm seeing around the age of 10, 11, 12, especially 11 years old upwards, a lot of conduct type disorders as well. Um, this could be defined as a continual pattern of aggression toward others, as well as intentional rule-breaking behavior. Conduct disorder is also a childlike disorder, childhood disorder, similar to oppositional defiant disorder. The onset is again around 11 years old, but it can also develop in early teenage years. General conduct disorder symptoms include aggressive displays towards other children, adolescents, and animals. Now, the animals part I think is key because sometimes it's hard to judge the behaviors between person and person. But then you see some of these same children extremely cruel to animals. And I think that for me raises flags in terms of, okay, exactly what is going on here. They also destroy other people's property and are prone to stealing and lying a lot. Right? Some of the common disorder signs and symptoms include expressive aggressive behaviors, which is being very, very mean to other children, it appears, using tools to injure persons or animals, past instances of physical cruelty to people and animals, direct stealing property from victims, forcing someone into sexual acts, finding multiple ways to destroy someone else's stuff, breaking into homes, again, lying, staying out late, and now running away from home. You see now in terms of TTPS, a lot of reports of missing persons, right? And all reports of missing persons are taken seriously. Some of the reports do involve a lot of teens running away between that age group, 12 to 18 years old. So we see when work is done, we see some things that represent so similar to conduct disorder, which on the spectrum authorized by the DSM-5.
Excellent.
I want to just bring together everything that my colleagues have said and tie it to the question that you asked about, distinguishing between a rough patch essentially or just some bad behavior to a mental disorder, right? So how do you know the difference between the laziness and the exhaustion or naughtiness and conduct disorder, right?
Yes, correct.
It really lies in, I think, the frequency of the symptoms, how often you see the behavior, how persistent it is, is it long lasting, is it of long duration, is it more days than not, how severe the behavior is. So you heard what Kirk described there. Those are very, very severe behaviors. You don't see that in an average child who is misbehaving, right? They're not going to set fires, they're not going to kill animals, they're not going to force other people into violent acts, etc. And then, as Crystal mentioned, the impairment, how does it affect their functioning in multiple settings? So you might think your child is lazy, but is the child just simply not performing certain behaviors at home, or do you see a pattern of behavior at home, at school, in their relationships, in the way they interact with others? That general pattern of withdrawal or violent behaviors and so. So I think it's very important because I think last week we started the discussion, sometimes as adults, we might think what children have to be depressed about. I'll give you something to be sad about or to cry about, right? So it's really important to be able to tell the difference between just a rough patch or mental health problems or having a bad day from something more serious.
Yes, and thank you for bringing it to the point like that, because I mean, in preparing our youth for the real world, you see, one of the challenges that I experience with the family approach to it is they're trying to figure out, okay, all right, if I assume this to be teenage stuff, you know, then it will settle down. No action is required. You understand? And then if we can bring to the viewer more clarity, a little bit more understanding, that they can say, okay, let's query it. Let's give them the benefit of a query and investigate further. Then we can have a chance to arrest things and to address things. You understand? So the key thing is really a conversation with the caregiver, the parent, the guardian, whoever, to say, well, okay, I'm seeing more than X, Y, and Z, the norm. I'm seeing, more than the baseline that you have described. So action is indicated. We have an indication for action, and really seeing them negotiating with themselves about, you know what, a lot of fancy talk, but really and truly, if we just let it blow over, you understand? But then no action is taken, and that young person goes into life with that disorder unaddressed. And this is why we're trying to bring it to that point to say, well, okay, how can they determine if it's something at least to investigate, and not just assume it's just bad teenage stuff going on. Yeah, excellent. Thank you for, right. So,
Michelle, excuse me, if I could just add one thing though. I think we also need to define the real world, because the real world is not consistent across the board.
Correct.
Right? So I have some youth who I do some work with, and their real world experiences include waking up every night to the song of shots, gunfire, right?
Right.
Or going to school and having to pass someone being killed in the street, right? Now you're asking that child to almost act as though he did not experience what they experienced the night before or the morning going to school, and still go and function and perform. What I've seen is that some of those children develop almost disassociative type behaviors in terms of the fact that I cannot trust myself to feel. Because if I feel, I cannot function in the real world. So almost like a sociopathic kind of situation whereby we have a number of these teenagers growing up lacking empathy or lacking just the ability to care for others, right? So and that could be their real world experiences, while some of the children have consistent households that may be different. So I think it's very important for the viewers to understand that they need to assess what environmental factors also influence their lifestyle and see what treatment also is applicable to their child.
Yeah, and the reactions that the children are developing to cope. So when we say dissociative reactions, we're talking about that sort of numbing out move where they try to distance themselves from the reality that they're facing. And of course, once you do not interact and allow yourself to feel things about it, that's when we talk about sociopathic sort of approach to things, where you're unfeeling, you're not able to empathize or recognize. And when you step back like that, that's why they do it, to cope. So it doesn't mean that they are built that way. It means that is a coping mechanism based on the environment that they are attempting to cope with. And so Kirk, that was an excellent point to bring out. Really, really good. And it really is so valid, because you've got to get past that first as a coping mechanism, as a way of coping, before you can really see who that child is and not who the coping child is, as two different young people altogether. So excellent point. I'm enjoying this. Viewer, did we not promise you an interesting panel? Hey, all right, we always good. All right, so what are we going on to next? What disorder or discussion are we going to flesh out next?
Michelle, before you go on, I just want to pick up on Kirk's point, which I think is really important, because we see a lot of, we do a lot of work in those communities that are affected by a lot of violence and so on. And I think that kind of set the trend for the national view on what is happening. And Kirk is works with the TTPS. What do they look at that issue from a community standpoint and are proactive in terms of developing programs to help these people, these children, actively. Because I think that is so important that that mental health issue is not being addressed in the manner which I think that it should be.
Yeah, yeah. So all this is newer. All this is new to us coming forward because we can have a start time when we started to see these behaviors come into fold over the last probably 20, 25 years. So the TTPS through Hearts and Minds as well do a lot of work in terms of trying to assess what is happening in particular communities by seeing the behavioral trends, right? I find that the NGOs do a lot of work also in being very, very specific in terms of trying to address what is happening with various populations, right? And as we do more research into crime and behaviors involving crime, away from the fact that a child is just not misbehaving for spite. A child is experiencing many, many things, and probably we, the adults, catching up now in terms of, okay, so this child is really in pain and don't have words to express what the pain is, right? And we've seen in terms of the behaviors, we've seen in terms of lack of empathy, we see in terms of lack of respect. And again, if you take the male child, the only emotion that we found that the male child really comfortable with is anger. And anger is the only one that in the community that is universally acceptable as masculine. So then if I negotiate most things from the place of anger, then how does that reflect in my behavior? Two, there's a lot of struggle in terms of emotions and behaviors. So people merge the two. So I feel how I behave, right? Could you control your feelings? Highly likely. Feelings really physiological and come from stimulus, right? But behaviors I have control over. What are behaviors? My words, my thoughts, and my actions. So once we kind of help youth separate how I feel from how I behave, we kind of start to see a change in terms of how we approach tackling the situation moving forward.
And I would also like to extend that to the home. If there is a violent home, and it might not be physical violence, but it might be psychological violence also, and the children is growing up into that home and experiencing that, they tend also to kind of become really deaden their own mind and emotions to dealing with the situation. And that would be their defense mechanism going into play.
So sometimes the only time the child recognizes that I am behaving differently is when the child goes into a different environment. So because the home is consistent, so everybody in the home or sometimes in the community behaves a particular kind of way, right? So the child behavior is quite consistent with their experiences. When they go into probably the school, and the school has different rules and different norms and stuff, that is when the child starts to now pick up the defense mechanisms in terms of, okay, how do I protect myself in this environment that does not appear to be safe for me? So although home is bad, home is still consistent, so it still appears to be safe. Whereas school is safe, but yet still inconsistent. So school is where I need to mask and come up with tools in which not to stay in the classroom sometimes.
So parents need to become more attuned and aware of those kind of behavior, those kind of situations, and understand that their children could be mentally affected by those issues.
I think they need to understand that we, the household, is affected. This means the parent themselves is also affected by the situation. So the help there is really for the system, not necessarily the individual.
Yeah. And on that point, before you continue, Hafiz, I'd like to encourage the families who are tuning in that the whole family needs to get that support. Okay, it's not an accusation of saying that everybody's family mad, and not saying that we have to drag in everybody. I have had reactions like, from that one child, you're causing trouble. Now we had to go down there. You understand what I'm saying? But so rightly said, it's a system, it's a unit. And if one part of that system needs support, then the adjustments need to be guided throughout the family system. So it's really about going to learn about efficient and caring support and it's not we dragging everybody down to say or to suggest that everybody might have a problem, okay? So it's just, I just wanted to reiterate that because that is another conversation that we have to have, okay? In terms of getting that whole family to understand that to continue to move together, we've got to have all the parts guided, you know, as well. Hafiz, did you have anything else?
No, I am fine. I just wanted to get those. I mean, that point that Kirk made was an interesting one. I just wanted to ensure that we elaborate a little bit on it.
Oh
So,
yeah, we could finish out the evening just on that, right? Yeah. So right, so continue. So what's next? We're going into what?
So I was thinking that as we're on the topic of disorders that or behaviors that have its basis in family practices,
Right.
as well as we've been talking about coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms, substance-related disorders, I think, is very, very relevant to the
Yeah.
adolescent.
Yeah.
And substance-related disorders, according to the DSM-5 that we spoke about earlier, really speaks to the use of any substance that might be related to alcohol, caffeine, cannabis, hallucinogens, opioids, sedatives, anything, stimulants, tobacco, any unknown substances as well.
Right.
And we tend to see the criteria being met when you have persons taking the substance in larger and larger amounts for longer than you're meant to. Some of them may want to cut down, but not necessarily know how to, not manage it well. They spend a lot of time getting or trying to access the substance. They may have cravings or urges to use it. They may be trying to use it again in multiple settings. The use of the substance may be causing a lot of disruptions in relationships, in problems at home. They may be giving up important activities to be able to use the substance. They may be continuing to use it in spite of knowing that they have a problem. And then you may see that they're developing withdrawal symptoms. So if they try to stop, they're having physical symptoms of withdrawal, psychological symptoms of withdrawal, which sometimes they try to relieve by taking more of the substance.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So, in terms of meeting a diagnosis, it really depends on the number of symptoms, so you can have anywhere between, 3 to and upwards of symptoms, which would distinguish between if it's mild, moderate, severe, and so on. So this is something that we see quite a bit in the adolescent population, and particularly in the adolescent population, as Kirk described them, in the real life, the reality, the real world out there, as children who've had adverse childhood experiences. This is a very meaning traumatic backgrounds. This is a very common issue that we see with this population.
Excellent, excellent. And while we're talking about addiction and taking it to numb out, what can we say about being addicted to numbness as opposed to being addicted to the substance itself?
Good question. Very good question. I think it's very much linked to what we spoke about earlier, this sort of dissociation and the wanting to not feel. So that in itself becomes the addictive substance. That the more that you avoid the pain, the easier it is to cope with. That is definitely one element of it. And it's also similar in terms of depression when we talk about self-harm. That desire to not feel, but also to feel. When persons who have self-harmed will tell you that they want relief from the problem that they're facing with, but they feel so numb inside that they want to feel something more. So when they cut themselves, or so they feel that pain, which is better than feeling the psychological pain that they feel. So there is definitely that element of numbness that is both desirable and undesirable.
Yes, nice. Thank you. Very good.
Nisha, on that particular score, I just want to look at that numbness. I think the national community is suffering from the same thing as it relates to violence generally. Now, when we hear somebody gets shot or somebody gets chopped up or whatever, we kind of don't really take it on as we used to before because it has become so prevalent. So it's something that we probably need to look at from that standpoint also. Is that a mental health issue?
Just to add, I just think we've become so desensitized to everything.
Yeah,
Everything is
That's right.
just so normal. Just the other day, I think I heard shots right behind my street and nobody panicked. You know, we just asked the question, what was that? But nobody panicked.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? And even, talking to colleagues and stuff like that, or even seeing clients come in, now it's just everything is just normal. Abuse is normal, self-harm is normal. Well, normal, quote unquote, but I think we've become so numb to it because it's just been bombarded. Our society has definitely taken such a quite a turn over the last, I think, decade or so, and structures have changed, cultures have changed, and everything is moving very, very quickly. And it could be scary at the same time, but as professionals and as we're educating people about mental health, we have to also kind of pull back that power in our own hands, in our own families, to know that we could do something about it. We could make change. We could make a difference, I suppose. Just to add that.
And to add one thing, Crystal, excellent points again. To add the fact that if I feel unsafe and I don't know how to feel safe, then I will just act as though what I experienced never happened. So I will see on the front page, child killed XYZ, and underneath XY store has a sale. It is easier for me to exist talking about the sale that the store has and dealing with the pain that a child has been killed. But if a child has been killed, what about my child? What about my safety? How am I to now negotiate the fact that I may be in a place and don't know how mentally to keep myself safe? So I just act as though it has not happened. Which also explains why most traumatic situations cannot stay on the front burner for a period of time, short period of time, because the reality of it to deal with it is very, very difficult for the persons as a society.
Yeah.
Is that a sign that really the, the lack of awareness of these mental health issues is causing us to develop defensive mechanisms to deal with it rather than take preventative or remedial action to deal with it as individuals? And probably that's what's causing. So this program is probably much more valuable than we are thinking. That it really should be out there to the national community in a bigger way.
I think the talk has to be continuous. From this program to many programs, to everything that people are doing, it has to be a continuous effort to keep mental health in the forefront as much as we can. Because so many times, as again, I'm speaking with colleagues, and you'll hear it in people's mental health, this mental health, but there's no action as on that we could really see or see the real impact of, or we might hear something in the story and it's like, okay, that's great, but what else? Because I think people are not realizing that mental health is just like physical health. Our health is just as important. Mental health is part of it. Just wanted to add that.
Wonderful. Yeah, and it speaks to coping mechanisms as well. That sort of going back to pretending nothing ever happened is because you don't have the tools, so just look the other way and behave like it never happened. So there are unhealthy coping mechanisms and there are healthy coping mechanisms, but they all cope, they work, not some in not so positive ways, but that's what happens. So ignoring, trying to behave like nothing ever happened, wiping it off your present memory is a coping mechanism. It's not healthy, but it does the job for that person who does not have the healthy tools. So it's really important that in every opportunity we get to equip, because we're asking them, take off your shield, take off your armor, but you're raw. So when they feel that draft come onto that raw self, they're going to pick back up what they knew. You understand? So the equipping part is a big part of the practice that we have to be responsible for when we're asking that unhealthy coping as in even the use of substances. We're asking that to stop. We've got to equip, so there can be a transition. So if we put down this shield, we'll pick up this armor, instead, and have it ready. Because in that moment, if there's nothing, then the what they know works will be done.
Michelle,
Excellent. I'm really enjoying.
Michelle,
Yes,
in terms
Hafiz.
of
Uh-huh.
when the teenagers like to be out there socializing, with COVID situation, what would be the effects of what is happening in the last year and almost a half, and expected to go on for probably the next year? What kind of effect would that be having on the young people in our homes? And what should parents be either looking for, on what kind of preventative action that they could take to alleviate problems that would come out of that? I'd like to hear the professional
Yeah,
answer.
the panel. We'll put it to the panel. Yeah. Who would like to speak on that?
Yeah, I'll begin. It's interesting you asked that. I actually recently did an article for a magazine on this very topic. One of the key things that we're seeing is a deficit in social and communication skills among children and adolescents. And at the core of behavior and the way we interact with others are our social and communication skills. So a lot of children have been robbed of the opportunities through school to be able to, through the lack of attending physical school, to be able to socialize in the normal way that they would, to meet up with their friends, to discharge that energy, to have a different environment. And sometimes school is the protective factor, right, from the home
Right.
environment.
Yeah.
It is the relief. And so a lot of that has been taken away. Not to mention that a lot of the extracurricular activities, sports and group activities and youth groups and all of these things have closed, recreational groups as well, activities, sorry. That would usually allow children an opportunity to de-stress and to have coping mechanisms as well. Those have been taken away. And so the inability, and when we enter now the virtual reality world now, so everything is online. You don't have to use your communication skills as you typically would, and a lot of interactions are now, there's a lot of games that are in the virtual world, and that in itself is a challenge in terms of how kids interact with one another when they come out of the virtual reality world. And so that is some of the big impacts, I would say. And in terms of linking it back to now mental health, we're seeing a higher rate, I find, of anxiety and depression in children, particularly when their social arena was the way that they coped. So you see a lot of children not having an avenue to express their feelings,
Yeah.
as well as to engage in these relaxing activities. Being perpetually online in itself also has its stressors. You're not able to mentally switch off, unless you're forced to switch off and parents are engaging in some other physical activity with the
Yeah.
family. So to get to the point now of what can parents do, it's really a challenge because, of course, parents themselves are undergoing their own mental health challenges, with managing COVID, managing their own coping, managing their family, working, balancing online school, all of that. So it really is a challenge. But where they can find the time to have their families engage in real life interaction, building those connections through communication, sitting and having conversations, if you're able to engage in, just the regular board games, or you're playing games out in the backyard, you do a football match, and I am speaking again about the average family, right? I'm not talking necessarily, because the challenges get even more when you add trauma in the picture, when you add violence in the home in the picture. That's a whole different picture there. So for the
Yeah.
average family we're talking about, this is where, we really have to spend the time building the connections by, nurturing those conversations, putting some extra effort in to be able to spend time with the family, where you can engage in activities together. You watch a show together. So simple sort of things to be able to really nurture the relationships and continue the conversation so that children aren't left out and their social skills don't continue to be diminished.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, guys, so our time goes really, really quickly. What we would like to get in before we close today would be OCD. We want to do the bipolar 1 and 2, and we also want to speak a little bit about the gender issues, gender dysphoria, or any sort of gender confusion that I certainly hear a lot of these days. So if we start with the OCD, a lot of people say they have OCD. As soon as we see some little repetitive or high energy behavior, we think, oh, OCD. So what's the difference between what they think they have and the actual disorder? Please educate the viewer.
Okay, I can take this one.
Oh,
Yeah, everybody thinks they have OCD.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what the disorder actually is, right? It's characterized by the presence of what we call obsessions and compulsions.
Yeah.
And obsessions are these recurrent, persistent thoughts and urges and impulses that we experience, which are very intrusive, very unwanted, and it causes a lot of anxiety and distress. And the individual then tries to suppress those thoughts and urges by performing the compulsion. So, for example, you might be having, a thought that, your hands are dirty, right? Let's just use a simple example like that. This is a common one. And no matter, you've washed your hands, you know that you've not dealt with anything that would soil your hands. You continue to have this persistent thought that your hands are dirty, and no matter how much times you wash it, they continue to remain dirty. So you try to fix that by washing your hands repetitively. So that's the compulsion. The repetitive behavior or an act that you feel you must do to be able to address the obsession. And they aimed at reducing the anxiety or the distress that you think you're having, but in reality, they're not useful, they're not actually helping. All right. So from very, very young children can start to experience this. And when I say young, under the age of 10, but they may not really be able to articulate or to say, that they're having these obsessive thoughts. But you might observe them finding, engaging in the compulsive behaviors. Some examples of compulsions persons might have is a repetitive act. So you see them hand washing all the time, or they might be checking, or they feel the need to count, or they may feel they need to take 10 particular steps in this direction before they do they walk in another way. And this is also to be very carefully distinguished from, say, a child who has a tic, or a child who is on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, who may also feel the need to engage in certain stereotypical behaviors. All right. Now, these behaviors are very, very time consuming. They may take up more than 1 hour per day, every day. And again, like all the disorders we're talking about, causing significant impairment in functioning in multiple areas of their life, right? At home, at school, and for adults on the job. Now, how is that different from the regular person who says, I have OCD, right? So you may be very meticulous. Persons may feel that they need to get certain things done a particular way, right? Or else it wouldn't be done well. That is very, very different from what I've described in terms of having these very intrusive, recurrent thoughts that you must fix by engaging in this compulsion every day, multiple times through the day, in multiple settings that disrupt your functioning.
And that if I may add as well, I found that when persons become conscious of it, when especially the older child, they really struggle. They really become kind of self-consumed and self-absorbed, and their self-esteem really takes a knock because I'm feeling this thing that I can't control, yet I think the whole world is now looking at me doing the same act over and over. I've also found that mind-altering substances, be it drugs or be it alcohol, really then makes person exposed again to not being able to manage their emotions when it comes to these particular types of disorders as well. So link it back to the substance use. I think in these kind of situations as well, substance use really, really affects the person struggling with some of these disorders.
Yeah, excellent. Anything else to add? Yeah. But this is a common one. I think just as Vandana said, meticulous and so liking things in a particular way. I mean, it's a joke. Oh yeah, I little OCD, so just go along with me and go along with me. So it's really, viewer is really to point out these differences. If you're meticulous, you handle it. You go through. Just understand that OCD is very specific. And what I want to emphasize is that intrusion of the thought. Yes, Vandana, that it's sort of breaking into your thought pattern without you inviting it, and that's really really a key difference in terms of the experience of the whole set of OCD symptoms. Excellent.
Yeah,
So,
I just wanna say too, I mean, at the risk of sounding, overly serious about it, um, I really like to discourage people from using the mental health terms loosely like that, because
yeah,
I'm a little OCD, or it's just as if you would say, a little depressed, or a little traumatized. Those you don't usually talk like that, and when you say those things, it invalidates the experience of someone who is truly struggling with what is a very serious disorder. So really to just kind of discourage the use of those types of terms, you say it for what it is. I like things to be a particular way, but rather than using the terms when it's not needed.
However,
And what
and today in particular, I have found that persons use the term as a form of protection, in terms of the fact that they really
yeah,
don't know what's happening with them, so they cannot take in front. So before you
yeah,
observe my behavior, I will tell you my behavior. They may be wrong, but at least it helps them to kind of control the self-esteem part of it in terms of being watched and then being judged by other
yeah,
person.
yeah. The reaction of those looking on, and they lighten it up a little bit with a joke, but it says a lot. It does. It is said a lot. I little OCD.
Michelle,
So it's really.
I would like to find out what should a parent do if it is that they have a child who thinks that, rather
Yeah.
than go to the extreme and make a judgment. What should they do actually?
Okay. Anna? What would be the first step? So let's say today we educating on, okay, what is the difference, and what to really look for. So let's say they look at it and judge that, okay, there's something at least worth investigating. And I'm saying it like that, viewers, so that you can understand that, okay, let me see, okay, based on what I understand now, what I'm saying, at least let me investigate. And that's really the first productive thought, the first step. So what can be that first step then? What can they do if they think that what they're seeing are some of the symptoms of OCD? Who would like to take it?
Yeah.
So what I'll say that to tell parents emphasize and reinforce positive behaviors. All right. Help the child to practice relaxation and breathing technique, especially when conflict arises because of the situation. Provide a structured household so that things are relatively consistent with the thing, right? Nobody likes to be told their struggles every day. Right? So put aside specific time to deal and address the particular issues being observed. And also ask the child, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? And say it from a place of empathy and caring and kindness, and not from a place of, well, if you don't change the behavior, you can't get at work and you'll suffer. Just make it something that allows the child to be thing. Again, consistency. And for the parents, realize that not everything is worth a fight. So I don't have to fight every time I see something that I want to change. Right? I could do something else and develop the consistency of a stable system and partnerships that really, really bring healing. And again, find a therapist, a mental health professional that can really, really help you and the family support this person through whatever they're struggling with.
Excellent.
I want to add, tying it back to something Kirk said earlier about, you could address the behavior. It's harder to address, the thought and the feeling, right? But the temptation of the parent might be to stop the compulsive behavior. I don't want you doing washing your hands this much. I don't want you doing this, and so you're trying to attack it from there. But what really is causing the compulsive behavior is the obsession, right? The thought. So as Kirk just said, as a parent, it might be important for you to shift the focus a little bit and instead talk with the child and try to get them to communicate what is the thought, what are you going through, what are you thinking, what are you feeling right now, so that if there's a different way that they can cope with the thought, this intrusive thought, they naturally will no longer have the need to do the compulsive behavior, right? So that's really trying to get parents to talk through with their children the thoughts and actions. And of course, if those things work, all of what we've just described, you do have to take the step to get formal intervention.
I just add to the OCD just quickly. Just as my colleagues, the communication is really key. But I know we're dealing with teens, but with the younger children, maybe younger teens, I know it's been helpful for some of my clients to actually for the parents to actually give the OCD a name. Differentiate, between when the frustration arises, so you're getting angry with Mr. OCD. I know that might work with younger ones, but it helps as well to kind of differentiate sometimes, because you don't want to. I think what we tend to see sometimes is that we feel the disorder, it defines us, and the disorder is a problem, and we are still who we are. We are still who we're meant to be at the end of the day. So sometimes that might be helpful as well by giving the child's name, the OCD a name as well.
Yeah. And I think the general awareness, I think it slows down the intrusion a little bit, the power of that intrusion when you bring it out and there's awareness and there's observation, both by the person themselves and the family members.
Correct.
It slows down the power of that popping in and taking over. And that's really what that obsessive thought will do. Excellent, guys. I'm really enjoying this.
And before I go, I just wanted to also bring up the fact that if we let parents know that this is not an issue that cannot be remedied, and in fact it is one that is well known and could be dealt with very effectively by a professional therapist.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so
I'd like to
we're
hear
going
a
on
professional
to
therapist say that.
yes, definitely, and we're hoping to give some hope for all of this in terms of all these disorders we're going on. We're giving detail on can that person and that family live a normal life, and I really want to get to that as we coming down to summarizing. So definitely that statement, Hafiz, will be made in that section. So we're looking at bipolar 1 and 2 quickly. Can you give the viewer some insight as to what it is and the difference maybe between each one?
Okay, so bipolar disorder is falls along a mood disorder continuum, right? And this is really where in bipolar 1, it's a condition where an individual has what we call a manic episode, all right? So a manic episode is where they have very expansive mood, grandiose ideas about themselves, what we call flight of ideas, right? So you're going from one idea to the next, decreased need for sleep, excessive amounts of energy. It's an extreme form of mood fluctuation, essentially, right? So this is where they have a manic episode. Abnormally happy or irritable mood, essentially. In bipolar 2, this is where a person has both a depressive episode, and we spoke about depression at length before, as well as what we call a hypomanic episode. So hypomanic is like a manic episode, but less severe. So you still have some of those, heightened sense of self, those grandiose ideas, the irritability or extreme happiness, but a little less severe. And persons with bipolar 2 have never had a manic episode. All right. So bipolar 2 could be considered, in quotation marks, a milder form of what bipolar 1 looks like. But they're both, like all the other disorders we talk about, cause clinically significant impairment in functioning across multiple settings. They also may be comorbid. We talked about that last week. They may coexist with other mental illnesses. They must not be attributable or caused by the effect of a substance or a drug or so. So they may be independent as well. So that's what bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 are. And the treatment for those, of course, involve a combination often of medication as well as therapy to address, of course, the thoughts and the feelings underlying the depressive symptoms, as well as the issues that deal with the sense of self, and medication, of course, to manage stabilize the mood.
Right, right. One of the things that I would like to clarify is that about anger, passionately expressed or demonstrated anger being seen as they swing to the other side. So it's like 1 minute they're quiet, next minute they're really angry. How is that seen as, yeah, the
Right. Another sort of similar thing where people say like he bipolar.
right,
Right.
correct.
Yeah. Right.
Because
Yes. Yes. Yes.
they display very passionate anger. So it's really speaking a little bit to that for the viewer's sake.
Yeah. So mood swings
Mm-hmm.
are different from bipolar disorder,
Yes.
right? And so mood swings, you may fluctuate in mood, and that in itself may have, some of its own basis in mental illness. But that's not what we're talking about here. When we say bipolar, we are talking about polar behavior that is separated by time, and it's again persistent over a period of time. We see that the symptoms have been lasting. I believe, subject to be corrected, I think it's at least 6 months. You're seeing those behaviors lasting. A manic episode can last from days to weeks at a time, before you switch again. All right. The impairment, if you meet a bipolar person who is actively having an episode, you will definitely know the difference between that and a mood swing. The grandiosity, the expansiveness of their mood is extremely detrimental to their functioning. Right? They're literally almost on a unending high, and that goes on for a period of time. It's not like they just switch, from 1 minute you're good and 1 minute you're angry. It doesn't work like that at all. So it's very, very different.
Right. Thank you for clearing that up. Okay, good. Any other contributions about the bipolar as
Like
we
I
go
just
on?
that the medication part of it works very,
Yes.
very well. And I like to say for therapists as well, especially for counseling therapists, I think that the investment with a psychiatrist on board allows the therapy to also work, the counseling type therapy to also work well as well. So I think that some persons cannot survive without the medication and be well. So talk therapy by itself may not be helpful for all types of this type of situation. And the other type of support is also needed moving forward with persons who struggle with these type of situations. All right? And when persons feel well, you think that that's a good thing. In this situation, it may not be a good thing because persons feel well and sometimes put themselves at extreme risk with happiness. They give away their stuff, they make promises they cannot keep, their sexual behavior on a high, they really do things that really compromise their own physical safety as well as mental safety as well.
And if they do get on the medication, do they have to stay on it for their whole life?
So I think that is something that the psychiatrist should be given advice on. So people try to come off of it when they feel well, right? The thing is that when you feel good, you don't know when you're not feeling good because there's no way for the person to tell. So somebody looking on could say, but then at that time, so most persons, at least at the first instance, when they feel well, they start to say, well, I don't need medication anymore because I'm now healed.
Right.
You need a lifelong support with the medication to navigate life challenges. So
correct. And yes, very good.
Just to add, though, I think a lot of people too, when it comes to medication, they worry about if it's going to be addictive. I get that a lot as well. And I think we've seen that, the medication though can actually be one of the most effective ways to treat mental disorders at this time. But it's normal to be concerned about it. I think if you're concerned, you should definitely ask the right questions as well. to the therapist if you're in regards to medication. So, you could ask, don't be afraid to ask, what is it for? What are other options available? What are the effects, the potential side effects, and how long should my child or my teen stay on this medication? It's a lot of ground research you have to do as well to combat the worries and concerns about medication, but medication tends to be quite useful and concurrently with the therapy as well.
Correct. Yes, and therefore the assumption shouldn't be made. Don't make the decision before you go.
No.
Go seek the help and be guided through the process of, if you're having that two-tier approach of meds and therapy, excellent. Have that decision made in the process, not before you go, right?
No. And don't be afraid to. Don't be afraid to ask questions as parents and loved ones.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Our time is, we're on the countdown. So any quick word on the gender dysphoria, and then we want to give some hope. We want to talk about resources available, and we talk about can they live a normal life, and I think that's important for us to close off on. Before we do that, tell us about the gender issues that we hear about so much. We have a lot of frightened families, frightened parents, with young people saying, whatever the gender issue is. So tell us a little bit about the gender issue as you would have seen it if you have, and also what is gender dysphoria?
So, I'll just continue there. So gender dysphoria in adolescence is definitely a mark incongruence between one's experience and expressed gender. So their assigned gender and what they're feeling may be two different things for sure. So definitely, they are looking at your expressed gender and your primary, secondary characteristics. So there's a strong desire to rid of your primary characteristics, which is what you're born with, and then to replace it with what you perceive that you should be, I suppose. So there's a definitely strong desire for that primary and secondary characters of the other gender. Right? So, and there's a desire to even sometimes be on the other side and alternate as well. I think that happens as well, because I also see a lot of teens where 1 minute I'm a lesbian and 1 minute I'm not, 1 minute I'm bi. It's a lot of, going back and forth. So there's a very strong conviction, though, I think, to keep in mind that their feelings and reactions are of the other gender. And in order to meet the criteria for gender dysphoria, though, the condition must be, again, clinically, giving that distress and that impairment in their social and occupational and other areas of work or vocation that may be happening. So definitely just, that's what and it has to last at least within 6 months. This wanting this expression and this being assigned to this confusion, I suppose.
Right. Okay, so let me just explain a few terms now. Of course, assigned gender, we're talking about the sex that you were born as, whether male or female, right? And just to understand, gender is a societal term that includes the sort of roles and expectations of the sex that you were born as. Yeah. So when we say assigned gender, we're talking about how were you born, male or female, with the associated body parts, right, of the male and female, right? And then the confusion comes with the expectations that society has placed on that sex. So the confusion then comes out of the fact that you were born one sex and you're experiencing the gender expectation. Yeah, and that's where the conflict comes in, right? So I just wanted to make sure you understood those things. So some parents will say, well, they're supposed to be confused. Why? They're supposed to be distressed, not confused about the gender and sex. But if you are having difficulty understanding what you are, then you're supposed to be distressed. So tell us a little bit about that. Anybody across the panel? What do we say to that parent who agrees you're supposed to be distressed? Why should that be normal for you? How can we talk them through exploring that with the young person? And of course, their principles may not match. And that is really the situation that we found a lot of that in. And because there's no place that they can discuss that, then they move into either numbing or trying to, go into suicidal ideation, thinking, and stuff like that. Is there anything we can say to parents or families going through that? It's tough.
Could it be that they need to seek professional help at that point?
They do.
Yes, they can. They can. I've had families attend family sessions to discuss the stress even among the parents in regards to trying to understand what's happening with the child in regards to the assigned gender and the expectation of what they want. So definitely, yes, they could seek therapy. It's hard, as you said, it's very difficult because you are trying to balance between as you said, principles and what makes the person happy as well, and the idea of acceptance as well. So there's always that type of struggle in the sessions where that is concerned. However, definitely I think there has to be a lot of communication, a lot of acceptance, a lot of understanding, especially for the teen as well. Have to have an understanding of, well, this is not a phase or a fad because everybody's doing it. This is something definitely I am identifying with. And it's not just because it's something that's popular that I'm seeing on TV or everybody's just temporarily a different gender. So definitely a lot of communication, a lot of understanding, especially from the teen's point of view. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I identifying with another gender? What is the feeling that is coming out of me? And for them to really express that so we could really kind of identify what's happening and not be so confused anymore.
Yeah, because of course the priority then becomes to reduce the confusion so they don't go downhill, isn't it? So principle or not, whether you agree or disagree as the caregivers, parents, guardians, it's about getting them out of that zone of dysphoria. Dysphoria is the confusion.
Yes.
Because if they stay with the confusion, then they start to decline and go into all different sort of negative directions, yes? So the priority is to really resolve the dysphoria, that confusion, okay, and not make it into a principal fight, a battle over values. And didn't bring it up like that, that these are the things that we hear coming out of sessions like that. So thank you, guys. So is there hope? So tell us, it's 4:26, never have enough time because it's always such an interesting discussion. Is there hope? We have all this going on, all these disorders. Can the family, can the person with the mental challenge, mental illness or disorder have a normal life? So that's how we want to end. We want to end with some hope. So we have a resounding yes. We should all unmute and say yes.
Yes.
Good.
One or other, when in doing work with persons, the disorder takes a backseat to how the person was treated as a child and what support the parents gave them as a child as they try to navigate and work out all these situations. So once we support them, they come out well and not harmed by the fact that when I was going through this, my parents did not understand and said some horrible things to me. That's the focus of their attention in adulthood, sometimes way more than disorder, that they usually find a way to work around. Human beings are very resilient. We are around for long because we have found ways over multiple centuries to adapt, right? And persons find their way in society. Just need to give them support in the childhood period of time so that they could be successful adults moving forward. And adding all the therapy, all the treatment, all the support systems, and yes, persons should look forward to a very hopeful, helpful life.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any resources, any quick notes on resources? Where can they go? Can they get this free? Can they get it low budget? Can they get whatever? What's available to be had?
Okay, so So in terms of what's available, first of all, talk about freely. Last week we spoke about there is the National Family Services Division, which offers counseling services and a range of other services for families, and so they can receive counseling there. I know we spoke earlier about the role of NGOs as well, like the National Islamic Counseling Services, and there are in other communities as well that can offer. Um, we spoke about depression and suicidality earlier, and there are
Yeah.
hotlines as well, right? So there's the Lifeline hotline. Search online will tell you the hotlines. There's Childline
Yeah.
as well. There's the Children's
Correct.
Authority hotline 996, where persons can call and be able to reach out for services. And there are a range of other NGOs that are available. If we talk about services that exist at a cost, of course, we spoke last week about there are various psychologists and other therapists available in private practice who may be able to offer services. And we spoke about a list being available online through the directory of services that was referenced. I'm not sure if we could recall the exact website.
Yeah.
And Association of Psychologists.
Yeah, I was looking to see if I had the note here. I don't. We'll have to put it up after.
Have listed online for some options that persons can look into, but there are other persons as well that can be accessed for private services.
Okay, wonderful. Excellent discussion. I will hand back over to Mr. Khan. Hafiz, you could close us, but I just want to thank the panel. Excellent discussions, and we really appreciate you coming on and really helping us to raise the awareness of mental health illness during this month of April. Okay, so thanks to everyone. You all were fabulous. Really enjoyed the discussions. Okay, over to you, Hafiz.
All right, I just want to give Priscilla a minute to say what she wanted to say because she's involved.
Oh, she had unmuted. Okay.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say there was the website Find Care PT, which is where you could get a lot of resources online as well. But in regards to just to add in regards to the private sector, I work for a nonprofit. So I do get a lot of people calling for counseling, and I always encourage families and parents and anyone, those who may not be able to seek free counseling, they can't wait, or whatever the issue is, the waiting time is too long. Don't be afraid to ask the psychologist as well if they work on a sliding scale fee. I know a number of psychologists who will work with the client as well to reduce the fee. And there are some who will do pro bono, they'll have a cap. So that's also available in the private sector. So don't be afraid to ask if there's something else available to help.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Cook, you want to say a last word?
No, I'm fine. Thanks for asking.
All right. So let me officially say thank you to the panel. I must say that I think today's program was excellent. A lot of information. The discussion was healthy. And I am sure that you out there would have learned a lot and probably have a lot of clarification on issues that you were already cloudy with. And this is the purpose of the program. I would encourage you also to, the program would be on Facebook and together with the other previous two programs. And for those who haven't looked at them, you could go back and look at it again. And even this one, you could go back and look again, take your notes so that you know exactly what needs to be done. Be sure and pass the information on to others because as we discussed, this information is so important across the country to all parents so that we could really get a handle on this mental health issue, which really, at the end of the day, has an impact on the social ills that we have within the society. If we could help build that awareness and people start getting the kind of help that they require, then we'll find that our society would become a much better society to live in for all. So look at our next program. We're looking where we would get more into the adult and elderly, which they have their peculiar problems also. And we will be looking at, again, general issues that we could look, that could help with mental health issues generally. So we will have a panel next week. Be sure to join us next week and spread the word about what we're doing. And again, look at Facebook, Family TV, Facebook page, and go through all the programs and spread the word around. Thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you all next week. Thank you.